So the big idea here is twofold. One, you don't really want to own billion-dollar buildings in London. You want to own $1 billion of a digital building that has no property tax, that can move to any city in the world, that can be upgraded with technology, right? There's a cost to owning the real estate. It's also, you can only buy the $1 billion building with $1 billion of capital. But if you're a taxi cab driver in London, you want to acquire the building at £287 a month. You know, you need to acquire incremental property. So digital property is better than physical property. And that means that you've got trillions and then tens of trillions and then hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital that should flow out of the buildings and the warehouses and the land into the Bitcoin network, because digital property is just better. Lower maintenance, lower tax. You can buy it and sell it in smaller portions. You don't need to be a rich family in London with an army of lawyers in order to buy Bitcoin.
Michael Saylor, the creator of MicroStrategy and one of the men who genuinely spearheaded the institutional wave of Bitcoin acceptance, believes Bitcoin has reached a tipping point and that billions of dollars in money are on their way. Michael explains that the ascent of Bitcoin is being driven by three key factors: the digital transformation of property, the transition of business balance sheets away from depreciating assets like cash and towards appreciating property assets like Bitcoin, and the digital transformation of money, which speeds up financial trades to the speed of light. Saylor's key point is that digital property, such as Bitcoin, is far superior to physical property. Unlike real assets, there are no taxes, it is borderless, technology-friendly, and accessible to anybody. As a result, capital will flood into Bitcoin from traditional assets such as real estate and debt, fueling its price rise even more. Keep watching to the end of the video to see Michael Saylor go deeper into these concepts and explain the future ramifications for Bitcoin's potential. Here's Michael Saylor explaining why he's so bullish.
I would say there's probably three drivers for Bitcoin's advancement. One is the digital transformation of property from physical property to digital property. The second is the conversion of corporate balance sheet from credit assets or debt assets, which are liabilities, to property assets, which are actually assets that are appreciating in value, like Bitcoin. And the third driver is the digital transformation of money, the ability to move money at the speed of light between a corporation and their customers or their partners. And that's the Lightning story. Mm-hmm. But let me just touch on each of them, because I think they're equally important. They're very important ideas. One, if I have a $1 billion building in London, and if the pound gets inflated by 7% in supply, then the currency I have loses 7% of its value between January 1st and the end of the year, the end of December. Now, I give you two companies. I give you a company that owns $1 billion of land in London, mm-hmm. or property, and I give you a company that has $1 billion of debt, of sovereign debt of the UK. On January 1st, if there's a 12% true inflation rate, the guy that owns the first company knows that his balance sheet's going to go up by 12%, and he's going to make £121 million by the end of the year. The guy that owns the second company is going to get a 3% yield, and the debt is going to lose 12% of its value. And so the guy that owns the second company is going to lose, well actually they're going to accrete nominally by 3%, by £30 million, but their assets won't be worth anymore. So there's a £90 million difference between a credit balance sheet or a debt-laden balance. I say credit. You're owning credit of the UK government. So the person that owns the credit is £90 million behind the person that owns the property. And if you just take it to the extreme, you just own the cash, well, your cash is worth 12% less at the end of the year. Your balance sheet of property is keeping track. So what you can see is that over the course of 10 years, companies that own property at that inflation rate are going to find their property value triples. And over the course of the same 10 years, the companies that just have the cash are going to have the same amount of cash, but it'll be worth 1/3 as much or something. So the companies that are operating companies that are required to hold cash or cash equivalents are being bled to death, and they're going to be bankrupted. And the companies that own property, the REITs, are going to keep up with the inflation. So the big idea here is twofold. One, you don't really want to own billion-dollar buildings in London. You want to own $1 billion of a digital building that has no property tax, that can move to any city in the world, that can be upgraded with technology, right? There's a cost to owning the real estate. It's also, you can only buy the $1 billion building with $1 billion of capital. But if you're a taxi cab driver in London, you want to acquire the building at £287 a month. You know, you need to acquire incremental property. So digital property is better than physical property. And that means that you've got trillions and then tens of trillions and then hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital that should flow out of the buildings and the warehouses and the land into the Bitcoin network, because digital property is just better. Lower maintenance, lower tax. You can buy it and sell it in smaller portions. You don't need to be a rich family in London with an army of lawyers in order to buy Bitcoin. The reason that the real estate is going up fastest is you can't make any more of it, or it's hardest. You can technically make more. If you've got a 50 floor condo in London, you can punch another 50 floor condo up. So it's easier to make square footage, but it's hard to make acreage in London. And it's very hard to make city blocks in center city London, in Chelsea or
sure. There's only so much land by the Thames and so on.
So conservative assets that the government can't make, the government can't make more land, and a company cannot make more land, and so that's going to go up the fastest rate. The reason that that education is going up fast is because the government puts a monopoly on it. There's a restraint of trade, and it's regulated. And the fact of the matter is, Harvard could issue 100,000 diplomas a year. They choose not to, right? There's not an interest. You could give education for free to everybody on Earth if you wanted to, with 1/20th of the Department of Education budget. But education is meant to be it's a regulated offer, and they want to keep the price high, and they want to keep the supply down. Like, if you're a doctor in the UK, try to come and be a doctor in New York City, right? You're not licensed the same way. So they don't really want to create lots and lots of those diplomas, especially not at Oxford and Cambridge. And the government supports that through accreditation. If you wanted to create a university to give education away to 1 billion people for free, it would take you 100 years and thousands of lawyers to get the accreditations in each of the 100 countries. So education is regulated, and wherever the government gets involved, they drive up the price. It isn't expensive because it's hard to produce. It's expensive because they make it specialized. Now, the reason that milk and eggs don't go up at the same rate is they're commodities, which means the government doesn't control who can create them. And so the free market finds an intelligent way to create more of them. When the government does get involved and it puts in price controls and import controls and makes it illegal to import eggs will go up in price. And you see that with all commodities, drywall, lumber. Human beings, if you ask the question, how hard is it to manufacture steel today versus how hard was it to manufacture steel 2,000 years ago? And then you go look at a modern steel factory, and then you ask yourself the question, how likely is it that you yourself can figure out how to manufacture steel in your backyard? You realize that the key to a commodity becoming cheap is for the government to get out of the way and let human beings find a way to manufacture a lot of it. And human beings get very good at manufacturing candy bars and steel and lumber and cars if the government doesn't get involved. The government is very involved in healthcare and is very involved in education, and so they prevent you from manufacturing lots of it cheap, right? That's the role of government in those regulated areas. Now, the telephone call is an interesting one. That's an information service. Now, that's free now. You can telephone call with WhatsApp or Skype or voice over IP, and it's gone to zero. And the things that go to zero are information rich, energy poor. They're commodities that have a low energy content and a low material content that are not regulated. And they, over time, will go to zero. Like streaming Netflix or streaming YouTube videos or phone calls. Anything like that, if the government gets out of the way, will become zero. Now, education will actually go to zero if the government gets out of the way, because algebra has been well known, well understood for 2,000 years. And you can pretty much go online and get all of the algebra lessons you want, on YouTube, or you can learn them from the Saylor.org for free. The thing that's holding up the cost of education is not the provision of the service. It's the certification of the degree, right? It's the license to say that you're a trained computer scientist that's expensive, not the ability to learn to program a computer. Every company on earth that's required to hold its balance sheet in cash or cash equivalents is being bled 7 to 14% a year by monetary inflation. And that's why all the companies fail. And that's why if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you want to be around in 100 years, you need a property company with your assets have to be property. They cannot be credit and they cannot be cash. And if you're trying to actually make money by doing something, like I'm a restaurant or I'm a hotel, the doing of something gets exponentially harder. When the true inflation rate is 12%, you have to grow your cash flows by 12% in the UK this year in order to stand still. So statistically, 99% of companies cannot grow their cash flows 12% a year. In a competitive market, if you don't have a monopoly, it's probably almost impossible for you to do that 5 years in a row. So when the political system creates a highly inflationary currency, if your business model is to have no capital as property and be capital weak, or to hold credit as capital or cash as capital, then you have to literally grow your cash flows faster than the inflation rate. And that's why there's a 99% mortality rate on companies. That's what's destroying hundreds of thousands and millions of small businesses. And that's what causes monopolies to form in every sector in the world. It's because of the monetary policy of the government.
We hope this film has expanded your awareness of Bitcoin's potential, as told by one of its most ardent supporters. Remember to keep current in the volatile crypto world. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it useful. I'll see you all in the next one.